Hi, my name is Syazwan and I'm the one behind Once Ubin Journal. Now, how many ones was in that sentence? Was it one too many or was it one too few? And if I repeat myself one more time, will I get one tight slap? I guess there's only one way to find out. Hi, my name is Syazwan and I'm the one Now, 2 weeks ago, I brought you on a live virtual tour around Kampung Sungai Durian. And let's say the experience was as smooth as a baby's bottom. You won't expect tip-top connection as assuming the baby is made of cement lah. So today we're going to do exactly not the same thing. Instead, today's virtual tour will be pre-recorded, edited at home through sleepless nights and countless cups of coffee, and premiered to you live at this timing. For today, I'm going to show you around another of Pulau Ubin's Malay kampung, known as Kampung Surau. Now, where can you find Kampung Surau on the map? Well, as you can see, you cannot find it because Kampung Surau no longer exists.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get.
However, one way to find out that you've already entered Kampung Surau is as soon as you pass this particular river. As soon as you pass by this row of nipa trees, you'll be able to come across this small bridge. And towards your left, you will be able to find a particular stream that looks like this. The stream behind me doesn't technically have an official name, but to the locals it does. In fact, it is named Sungai Awang Minyak. And the reason why it is named Sungai Awang Minyak is because it is named after my grandfather. You guessed it, Sulong Yunus. Hey, wait, hold on a minute. Sulong Yunus and Awang Minyak is no link leh. How come like that? Well, that's because Awang Minyak is just the nickname given to my late grandfather. And for those of you who are curious, minyak is the Malay word for oil, and the reason for this is because my grandfather used to work with the Public Works Department, playing his part to control the mosquito population by spraying oil all around the island. As for awang, however, it is quite interesting because I've also just recently come across this myself. It is actually a very common name or title given to those who are from Pahang or Terengganu up in Malaysia. And here's a very fun fact. My grandfather was not born on Pulau Ubin. In fact, he only moved here in the 1950s. He was, however, born on Pulau Tekong in 1922 in a village known as Kampung Pahang. Upon doing more research on this, I came to learn that Kampung Pahang and even Pulau Tekong itself was probably founded by settlers that were Orang Melayu Pahang who came from Pahang. My aunt also shared with me that there is a very likely possibility that my great-great-great-grandparents were among those who founded Pulau Tekong. But of course, if I were to drill into this any further, then Once Ubin Journal might as well be turned into Once Tekong Journal, which means I'd have to cut botak and serve my time there for 2 years. But of course, where I got time? Oh, Adilo! Now, touching back on Sungai Awang Minyak, the very reason why this river was named after my grandfather was because my grandfather used to anchor his sampan among this water body. Now, apart from his main job as a pesticide sprayer, he was also known for 2 other jobs. He also used to serve together with other villagers in the Singapore Police Force Volunteer Corps, where he served as a volunteer police officer to make patrols around the kampung to keep the kampungs here safe. But of course, his most prominent job, the one that the residents most fondly remember my grandfather for working as, was the fact that my grandfather used to own a cereal tree plantation right at the back of his house, 818K. So if you still haven't found out just yet, Kampung Surau is a very important and special place to me because this is where my roots came from. This was the kampung where my mom was raised in from 1959 all the way to 1989, where she spent the first 30 years of her life. She is now currently 61, so you could literally say that she has spent half of her lifetime living on Pulau Ubin. And while I wasn't born and raised on Pulau Ubin like my mom, it doesn't change the fact that I am considered a descendant from this community, which is why in this video I hope that I can play my part as a descendant to help promote the culture, heritage and way of life of the Ubin Malay kampungs. Kampung Surau is in fact considered a very big kampung. It was once home to over 30 different houses and over hundreds of residents. In fact, some might even say that Kampung Surau would have been considered the main Malay kampung in Pulau Ubin, because it is in this kampung that you are able to find important and significant places of interest. And this included the Sekolah Melayu Pulau Ubin or the Pulau Ubin Malay Primary School, the Surau Pulau Ubin or the Pulau Ubin Mosque, as well as undocumented World War II fort. So in the spirit of this year's theme of Pesta Ubin, which is remembering Pulau Ubin, let me bring you on a virtual tour around Kampung Surau so that we can all together remember Kampung Surau. And I guess there's no better way for me to start the tour than with house number 818K, aka my grandparents' house. Now you might be able to notice that there is a very prominent tree right behind me. Well, that's because this is also the very same tree that can be seen in many of my family photos taken in the past. Till this day, I am unable to provide you with the scientific or the English name, but to the locals it is called the Pokok Gawa. And here is a fun fact. Did you know that in the past, residents used to keep a lookout for natural landmarks to provide a sense of direction to those who intend to visit their homes? I'm now currently standing on my grandparents' house. In fact, the only remnants that is left of the place is this wall. And if we were to refer to the photograph taken in the past, this particular wall is also the wall that used to make up the prayer room of the house. And this isn't technically the first time that my grandparents' house is featured on a film. That would have to go to a feature by our grandfather's story taken 2 years ago. Hi, and welcome to my Kampung Crib. Let me show you around. Cringy ba? Hi, welcome to my crib. Let me show you around. The outline and border of the prayer room can still be seen today. And yeah, all the way there and here. And if you are curious to find out where is the direction of Mecca, especially for our family when we need to perform our prayers, it is exactly right in front. And of course, some of you may say, Juan, how is it possible that you are very sure that this must have been your grandparents' house? What if it was someone else's? Well, that is quite true. But fortunately for my mum, she remembered the very specifics of the place. In fact, one way to find out and confirm that this was in fact 818K was to look at the distance between the well and the kitchen door. She remembered specifically that you need to take at least a minimum of 5 steps from the kitchen door to reach the well. So, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good job! Well, if it isn't my grandparents' well. Now this well behind me had a specific purpose. This was used by my family for showering and also for laundry and washing the dishes. In fact, it is very common for many of the houses who have wells to have at least 2 of them to separate the different needs. As I've mentioned earlier, this is for showering and another one would be used for just drinking. Now the 5-step challenge was just one way to confirm that this was 818K, and if you refer back to the picture, you would find that my grandparents' house was pretty big and also pretty blue. Which was why when I stumbled across a blue piece of wood hidden underneath some leaves here, and being the Sherlock Holmes I am, looking at the fact that the blue is the same as the one in the picture, I could confirm that this was in fact 818K. In fact, that blue piece of wood is now hanging up on my living room wall. Now, as mentioned earlier on, my grandfather was known for his sirih tree plantation. And for those of you who are curious to find out what a sirih tree is, you're in luck. This time I actually know the English name for it. It is known as the betel nut tree. It's also a creepy vine, so I'm not sure if a tree is the proper term for it, but
it is what it is.
It is what it is. The sirih leaves are actually a very important and significant part for the Malay and even Indian culture. That is because these sirih leaves will be used as dowry gifts during wedding ceremonies. So it is also not much of a surprise that because of the fact that there is a constant demand for these things as part of our tradition, that my grandfather's betel nut tree plantation is considered pretty huge. Residents would also liken the size of my grandfather's betel nut tree plantation into that of a small soccer field. And speaking of soccer, let me share with you this joke that has been shared with me by the residents about Kampung Surau's unofficial football team. And it has something to do with my grandparents' neighbours, the Siddiqs. Now, just like many other families on the island, Mr. Siddiq had many children, 17 of them. So if there was ever a need to form a football team, you would always call on the Siddiqs because the children themselves will make up 12 main players and 5 reserves. Now, touching back on the sirih leaves, did you know that they are quite highly addictive? It could even be likened to that of tobacco. And if you were to chew on these leaves, your teeth will bleed. Not because it's painful or anything, but because it secretes a reddish dye that will leave a stain on your teeth. And given the fact that these sirih leaves are likened to that of tobacco, it is no surprise that chewing these leaves also happened to be a favorite pastime for many of our elderly Ubin folks, including my mum when she was a teenager, because she was a rebel. Now let me show you the rest of Kampung Surau, because if I were to stay any longer in this forest, I might as well run a blood donation bank, because these mosquitoes are sucking me dry. Now, were you ever one of those dramatic kids that, as soon as you woke up early in the morning, you just dreaded the idea of going to school? As soon as you wake up, you just say, I'd rather die than go to school. Well, if you ever happen to be a student from the Sekolah Melayu Pulau Ubin, death is always on your mind, because the school is located right next to the entrance to the cemetery. In fact, it would have been pretty normal for the students to look outside the classroom window just to see some pallbearers carrying the body of a dearly departed right outside. And if you thought that catching your discipline master outside your classroom was the most scariest thing, the students of this school definitely went through a lot more than that. Now, Sekolah Melayu Pulau Ubin was built in 1955 and it ceased its operation in 1998, only to be demolished a few years later. What is also interesting about the school is that if you were to ever ask any of the Malay residents, depending on their age, they will give you the answers of two different batches. Some would say that they come from the Laut Sekolah, which means sea school, and the other would say that they come from Sekolah Darat, which means land school. And the reason I say this is because my mom was actually schooled in the Sekolah Darat, while her elder siblings were all schooled in the Laut Sekolah. And as the school continued to receive more staff who came from the mainland, there was a demand to have a certain lodging or quarters for the teachers. And so, perhaps, the school eventually expanded to Sekolah Darat, and the Laut Sekolah was later transformed into the quarters for the staff, with classrooms then later shifted into the new building of Sekolah Darat. And now, like I said earlier on, the school is located right next to the entrance of the cemetery, which you can actually still find today. All you need to do is to just look out for a sign, and it's actually this sign right in front of me. So this is the sign. Okay, so the sign isn't technically spelled correctly. I wonder what really happened. So the Kampung Melayu Muslim Cemetery is actually located uphill, which means that it's going to be quite a climb. And it's a good opportunity for us to get rid of our circuit breaker body. So, it's a good opportunity for us to lose some weight. So let's do the climb then. So I've already lost 5 kilos thanks to that climb, and yeah, it's really steep. And if you weren't able to see through that quick montage just now, here's the point of view that I have of how steep the slope actually is. If they see me rolling, they hating. And it's definitely quite a very tricky and challenging thing, especially for our pallbearers, for them to have to carry a body of a dearly departed up a very steep slope lah. So the Kampung Melayu Muslim Cemetery is the final resting place for many of the former Malay Ubin residents. In fact, some of the tombstones here can be dated as recently as the 1980s, and some of them can be as far back as the 1920s. However, some of the tombstones also no longer have the engravings visible, which could also suggest that some of the residents here were probably buried even before that. And in fact, one of my uncles is also buried here, and this is a rather sad story that my mom has shared with me before, with the story of how my uncle passed away. So my uncle, Kamarudin, was only 6 when he passed away. He was considered a very special child because he was handicapped and also because he had severe asthma. So while growing up, he definitely had a lot of attacks, in which my mom recalled that my grandmother would always have to make frequent trips to the mainland to get the treatment that is needed. And my mom had a very fond relationship with Kamarudin. In fact, it's definitely something that she looked forward to after every single day at school, for her to be able to play and take care of her little brother at home. Unfortunately, one fine day when she did return from school, she saw that there was a crowd gathering outside of her home. That was when my aunt or her elder sister came and approached her to say that Kamarudin has passed away because he had a very severe asthma attack and was not able to be saved in time. My mom was able to recall that my late uncle Kamarudin was buried underneath a tree known as the pokok kelat in Malay. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is in English or its scientific name. And also, unfortunately, I don't know how a pokok kelat looks like. So which means till this very day, I'm unable to find the grave of my uncle, which I really do hope in the near future is something that I'm able to do so. In fact, you might actually come to realize that this Muslim cemetery, considered to be abandoned, is actually pretty well maintained. Well, that's because the former residents, who are the descendants of these ancestors, they still do come back to take care and clean up after their ancestors' graves. More than anything, it just goes to show the very special connection that the people here have for their ancestors as well as their island home. So right now I am going to go downhill with my 2 feet, of course. I don't want to do an 8 row to bring you to the next location, the very reason why Kampung Surau is called Kampung Surau. Now perhaps you might be thinking to yourself, I don't really feel like climbing up a hill just to see a cemetery, but I still want to see a cemetery. Well, you still can do so. By traveling down the path, you'll actually come across a cemetery that is exactly right next to the path. Now what is interesting is that this wouldn't technically be considered a path in the past, because this open space behind me was where the surau once stood. And now you know the mystery behind the name of this village. Kampung Surau was called Kampung Surau because this kampung had a surau. Wow! Now for those of you who don't know what a surau is technically considered a mosque, perhaps maybe just a little bit smaller. So right behind me was where the Pulau Ubin Mosque once stood. Now just like any other surau in any other Malay kampung, this would have been considered the community hub for the Malay residents who stay on Pulau Ubin. This would be the space where the residents will come to perform their 5 daily obligatory prayers, together with the Friday prayers, the special prayers including Hari Raya Idul Fitri and Hari Raya Idul Adha prayers, and also throughout the holy month of Ramadan, the special Tarawih prayers. And of course, religious classes and religious lectures were also held in these premises. Now the Pulau Ubin Mosque isn't just a popular place for the Uben residents. In fact, this place is also frequented by those who stay in the mainland, namely those in the Kampung Changi and also those who stayed in Pulau Tekong. And the reason why this place was frequented by people from these places is because it is actually very accessible. The reason for this was because in front of the mosque there used to be a very long jetty that headed all the way out into the sea. Unfortunately, I know little about the origin stories of the mosque, but I do know of the reason why the mosque was demolished. Now, as many more residents who stayed particularly close to the surau have left the place, that means that the surau is now considered isolated. This unfortunately led to the opportunity for crime to be committed, and the crime in question is drugs. How the mosque was demolished is still currently conflicting because different residents have shared different accounts. However, it will still be summarized into one of 2 possible outcomes. One of it suggests that the residents were the ones who tore down the mosque to protect whatever sanctity was left of the place, while another source suggests that the mosque was burnt down because in the process of making these drugs, the ones responsible burned the mosque down in an accident. Whatever the true case may be, it is still nonetheless a very tragic end for the namesake of this village. Following the absence of a running mosque on this island, the Islamic culture on this island has since been absent for close to 2 decades. However, in some lighter news, I'm very happy to share with you that One Uben Journal, together with stakeholders from the Friends of Uben Network, or FUN in short, and together with the National Parks Board, or NParks, are currently in the midst of talks to see how we can rebuild a Muslim prayer space in the Malay kampungs of Pulau Ubin. God willing, if we are able to get this through, we will be able to reintegrate the long-lost Islamic culture of Pulau Ubin and promote it through the mosque as well as the Malay Kampung Community Gallery that is planned to be built together with it. And if you are very keen to follow this project through, be sure to like and follow One Uben Journal on social media, because that is the only place for me to be able to share with you the updates on the progress of this restoration project. So once again, if you're actually interested to find out where the Pulau Ubin Mosque was, keep a lookout for the graveyard that is located right next to the path. And if you still need more assurance as to whether or not this is a graveyard, keep a lookout for a sign. And for this cemetery, this is the sign that is another typo also. Now, many residents recall having a fort being built at this particular stretch of the kampung. Now, whether or not this fort was used for World War II or was it built before that or afterwards is still not known. However, due to the structure though, it is quite possible that this was in fact used for military purposes. So this particular structure definitely depends a lot more on concrete, because that's the only thing that is left of the place as opposed to other kampung houses. Yeah, so this particular stretch is very significant to make me think that this is in fact the fort because of this particular slot as well. So you are able to see a very interesting indentation in how this thing works. Perhaps it was used to hold a very concrete door. It could be strong enough so that any big bad roof will not be able to blow this house down lah. So there are these particular things as well. There's a big hole down there. Not sure if it's for vantage purposes or maybe it's a big toilet. This one too. And this particular stretch, it's interesting because you're still able to see these two pillars. Not sure what these holes are for. This is the, I assume, one of the entrances into this building, because there's a step here. And yes, this was how the fort looks like. And the sea is actually behind all this deep forest. You would have had a very nice vantage point of the Serangoon Straits. Now, talking about World War II, did you know that Pulau Ubin was the first place in Singapore to be captured by the Japanese? It happened on the evening of 7 February 1942. And according to sources from the National Library Board, it says that the Japanese bombarded Changi right here from Pulau Ubin. And while the Changi artillery forces did put up a very intense fight, unfortunately it had very little effect, only causing damages to the rubber trees that are found all around Pulau Ubin. And of course, we later learned that the Japanese had no real intentions of invading Singapore from Pulau Ubin. In fact, it was just seen as a decoy to distract the British from its intended point of attack, which was through a very narrow part of the Johor Straits, which was why the Japanese came and invaded us from the north and northwest. We have now come to the end of today's virtual tour around Kampung Surau. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, because I know I have. I managed to lose some weight, I got to meet some monkeys, I got chased by wild boars, and I'm definitely feeling very generous because I've donated so much blood today. But before I go, I'd like to give you a story as to why Kampung Surau no longer exists today. And that's because in 1987 and 1993, the SLA, or the Singapore Land Authority, had carried out two separate exercises to acquire the land on Pulau Ubin. At that time, the government also had plans to transform Kampung Surau into a place of recreation, with some of the residents remembering that it was supposed to be a water amusement park. And 30 to 40 years later, there's no water amusement park. And while the greening of our planet is definitely an encouraging sight that we should be proud of, because it shows that our fight against climate change is working, not everybody is able to taste that same sense of sweetness. For the people of Kampung Surau, it would have been a rather bittersweet moment. For them, this was the place where they grew up, where they even went to go and raise their own families too. And for the houses that they stayed in, it is also those buildings that were built by their ancestors through their hard work, blood, sweat and tears. And to have to see those houses demolished in front of them, it is definitely a very heartbreaking sight. So today, while Kampung Surau no longer exists, the people who used to call this place home still do. And the descendants from that community still do. Which is why it is quite crucial that for us as descendants, as well as for anyone else within this community, to play our part, to reach out to you, to share with you why this place means so much to us, or why Pulau Ubin means so much to the people here. As I mentioned before, the Kampung Surau and Pulau Ubin are the last remaining ones located offshore of mainland Singapore, which means that this is the only place left for us to look back in our past and still get the experience today. If more than anything, it is a sign for us to remember that we all have a part to play to preserve Singapore's final offshore kampung, and especially for this part of the island, the final remaining Malay kampung in Singapore. So once again, my name is Syazwan, and I'm the one behind One Ubin Journal. Thank you so much for tuning in today's live virtual tour. I hope you've enjoyed yourself today, and I hope that you will leave a like on this video and in fact share it around with your friends so that the more people that gets to know Pulau Ubin will come to get the chance to love our island too. And be sure to like and follow One Ubin Journal on social media so that you too get to learn more about my findings, adventures, stories and memories as I come back to not just find out more about my family roots but also give back to the community here. Now, for those of you who have been to Pulau Ubin in recent weeks, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the residents for your help in helping them to tide through this very difficult time. In fact, it has been very encouraging to see that a lot of you have come back to really lend a helping hand. And for those of you who have yet to come back to Pulau Ubin, well, I only have one question for you. Where have you been? Thank you so much for your time today, and I really hope to see you on Pulau Ubin soon. Till then, take care, stay safe, and